we are talking about innovation in digital transformation, which, as you will already have noticed from the session so far, is kind of one of the backbone, really, I think, of innovation and transformation going forward. We have a really stellar panel with us here. I'm going to do some very quick introductions. And again, I've asked our speakers to keep their opening remarks as concise as possible so that we can come back to you in the audience, because I think, as we saw from that first session, it gets really interesting when we get engagement from the audience. So I'm delighted to welcome, we have Megan Lee Devlin, who is Chief Executive of the Central Digital and Data Office here in the UK. Then we have Claire Martorana, who is the Federal Chief Information Officer at the Office of Management and Budget from the Executive Office of the President in the United States of America. So direct from the White House. Delighted to have you here, Claire. Then we have Lucas Ilves, who is Government Chief Information Officer from Estonia. As we've heard, very, very important for kind of all things data and digital in Estonia. No pressure there, Lucas. Then I'm delighted to welcome Mark Palmer, who is Vice President of Visa Government Solutions for Europe across Visa. Then Christina Lang, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Digital Service in Germany. And then last but not least, Andre Christensen, who is Chief Executive Officer, Digital Iceland at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs in Iceland. So a really, really international and quality panel here. Do make the most of that with your questions. Megan, I'm going to come to you first for your opening remarks.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here with you this afternoon and with international friends here on stage. Here in the UK, we have no shortage of really brilliant examples of the ways in which we're innovating to improve our public services. And I wanted to share a couple of examples. Our colleagues in DEFRA are using AI to map a region of the UK, convert it into an interactive Minecraft app, and therefore teach children and young people about climate change and also better model the impacts of flooding. In terms of data, we are, very recently, data sharing across several departments and indeed with energy providers enabled us to provide 3 million low-income homes with energy credits this winter to help with the cost of living crisis. And in terms of apps, we have some brilliant mobile-enabled technologies which are enabling us to reach the public where they are, from our COVID app that was used for millions during the pandemic to help people travel freely and safely, and the HMRC tax app, which is actually used by over 500,000 people every month, whether it be to check their national insurance number or check their tax credits or indeed their payments. So some really brilliant examples of great innovations. But we all know that technology is moving at an incredible pace. I read recently that generative AI, for instance, is doubling in power every 59 days. So the speed and that acceleration in emerging technologies will never be as slow as it is today. And I think that is truly remarkable. And what generative AI has shown us in the last couple of months is that distant future realities can become today's realities very, very suddenly. And so what we're doing here in the UK, faced with these proliferation of different digital futures, whether it be virtual reality, whether it be predictive and personalized virtual assistants, is thinking about how do we harness these tremendous technologies for the benefit of all within government. And that looks like our roadmap. So we launched a roadmap last year, Transforming for a Digital Future. And that's really about 3 things. It's about putting the culture, the capabilities, and the conditions in place for us to better harness digital technologies and these emerging technologies. And I'll just share a little bit about what each of those means. So on culture, we know that culture is just behaviors at scale. And so what we're doing, and that is really disproportionately impacted by leadership behaviors and by people's knowledge and skills. And so we're working to upskill 90% of senior civil servants across all professions in digital data and technology essentials by 2025. And we're looking at embedding greater performance culture in our top 75 most important services by using some consistent best best practices when it comes to measuring our performance over time, so that we can really raise the bar when it comes to performance of those services in terms of usability and efficiency. Capability. So when I say capability, I don't just mean skills and capability, people capabilities, but also technology and systems capabilities and data capabilities. We're putting a lot of the foundations in place over the next couple of years, whether that be modernizing our highest risk legacy systems across all of government, shifting our nationally important systems to the cloud, and ensuring that our critical data assets are available for cross-government reuse through our data marketplace and through the integrated data service. And these capabilities in sum mean that in the future and going forwards, we'll have the right building blocks in place to respond at pace to new and emerging technologies when they do arrive on our doorsteps. And finally, and by far the hardest of these three, is putting the conditions in place for digital teams to thrive. And there are many reasons why in government it can be difficult to innovate, many that my colleague Alex Chisholm outlined earlier in his keynote address. But this particular mission of the strategy, system reform, is about running towards the fire and addressing head-on some of the systemic blockers that we have to digital transformation in government, whether that be our funding processes, whether that be our governance processes and other ways of working, and working cross-functionally and right at the heart of government through the Cabinet Office and Treasury to address some of those challenges so that digital teams can thrive. So I hope you take from this that while ideas and emerging technology are really rife across UK government, and as technologists we love to talk about them quite a lot, putting that culture, capabilities and conditions in place for digital teams to harness those technologies on an ongoing basis now and in the future is absolutely vital.
Thank you so much, Megan. So really good examples of some great things that are already going on, but as you say, huge pace of change when it comes to technology. So how do we keep up with that in the public sector on that culture, the capabilities and the conditions? Thank you so much. Claire, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and it is such an honor to be on a panel with my esteemed colleagues. We learn from each other, and that is one of the most valuable things about having the opportunity to come together and to visit with you all. I think our digital transformation journey in the United States is focused on three components: simple, seamless, and secure. And all of the products and services that we are focused on delivering are, that is using simple, seamless, and secure as our North Star. So we are really focused right now on cybersecurity. That is kind of the point of the spear for much of the activity that we are focusing on. Following with that is customer experience, making sure that we're able to deliver services efficiently and effectively, using data as a strategic asset. And also something that is not quite as sexy, but is essential, I think, for all of us, is IT modernization, is making sure that we are building those legacy systems, securing the legacy systems that exist, and also building a transformation into those tools and services as we go forward. So the way that we're thinking about this is cybersecurity is the tip of the spear. It has a lot of attention in our country. And it has a lot of bipartisan support from our political establishment. And so on that arrow of cybersecurity, we have put IT modernization and customer experience, because to keep systems secure, you often have to rebuild them, and making sure that you're building for the customer as we're going through this digital transformation is essential. And our customers are both our external customers, the public, but also our workforce, making sure that our workforce has the tools to be able to interact with our systems, measure progress, use real-time data to inform our decision-making. And we're focused on that in every single day with the support of the President, putting out some customer experience executive order, an executive order on cybersecurity, and some upcoming ones that will continue to drive digital transformation.
Thank you so much, Claire. A really nice way of putting it. Simple, seamless, and secure, everything you do in your digital transformation journey, and using that focus on cybersecurity to address the other things like the modernizing the IT systems. And also really interesting the way that you say customers are not just citizens, they're also people like this in the room.
Exactly.
So the workforce itself can benefit from all of this. Thank you so much, Claire. Lucas.
Thank you. Well, I'm always very humble when talking about Estonia. We have this reputation that precedes us, but the reality of our work is that for us, digital transformation is just as much of a challenge as it is for any other government. As Alex said at the beginning, we don't have to compete for our customers, and so that cultural pressure to constantly iterate is just lacking. Estonia does have two superpowers that most governments don't, and they are really important. Because they lower the cost of doing new services. And those are, first of all, identity. That we sort of solve the identity question. We've got one identifier for every person, and that's extensible and callable on any service, any system. So you always know that the identifier you're dealing with in a service is actually the physical person they're supposed to be. And the other is data. So sort of across the government, a single way of governing data, sharing it between agencies, building services that pulls on data from multiple places. Very technical challenges, but the benefit of getting those things done is that the cost of people building new services goes down dramatically, and basically you can kind of speed up your iteration cycle. But beyond that, all of these sort of changes that Claire and Megan just talked about, we are struggling with ourselves too. We just had an hour-long chat yesterday, and basically almost point by point what we're working on right now, how we engage with permanent secretaries, how we measure results, it's the same agenda. So Claire's also doing the right thing. Megan's really doing the right things, guys, so if she comes and busts your chops, she's doing it for a reason. But I do want to point out 3 places where government differs from the private sector, and that we should always bear in mind. And they all come down to the idea that, in the words of some UK civil servants a while ago, government is a platform. And so the first thing we think about with our data is not just how can we share that within government to build services, but how do we leverage that as an asset for our economy and our citizens as a whole. And that means individual data sharing. We hold a lot of data on behalf of citizens. It's ultimately their data. They should be able to share that with healthcare providers, with banks, with energy providers, et cetera, to get better personalized services, whether that's personalized healthcare, tax credits for reducing their carbon footprint, and data as a collective asset. So as we think about the next generation of healthcare, for instance, and providing personalized medicine services that combine health data, environmental data, genetic data, to go to people who are at risk for cancer 5 years before they develop it and prevent that cancer, and things like that really, over time, will extend all of our lifespans, help us live in a healthier environment. Those mean using our collective data assets, finding ways to bring the private sector in to do things on that data while protecting people's privacy. The second is that actually a lot of this transformation stuff we're talking about, we've been talking about how we're learning from the private sector, but the reality is that the picture is very diverse in all of our economies. Yeah, there are some amazing companies that are a decade or 2 decades ahead of government. There are a lot of businesses, especially smaller and medium-sized enterprises, that are struggling with digital transformation just as much as we do. So one of the things I'm thinking about right now, I don't have easy answers, is how does the programming we do to educate our civil servants and raise the skills of our civil servants also help other sectors of the economy that maybe are behind, places like construction, agriculture. How do we kind of build communities of practice that, again, blend public and private? And the last thing is about government-to-government innovation. We heard a little bit about this in previous panels, but we are very proactively looking at ways to build products and services with other governments. So Andri and I both sit on the board of a little foundation along with the Finnish government CIO, where currently we build our interoperability platform together, we procure it together, and we're looking at other products we could build together. As we speak, we decided a year or 2 ago to build a government app. We are copying the code base that Ukraine has used for DIA. It's brilliant government app, and we'll be deploying that in the next couple of months in Estonia. And are really actively looking for other ways where it's not just collaboration and sharing, that's great, but when you actually have product owners sitting together and jointly owning code and services, you get to a different level of collaboration. So for everyone around the table here, I want to be looking for ways that we can do more of that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lucas. Really interesting to hear you talking of digital. The digital identifier is a superpower because there's so much noise around digital IDs. It'd be interesting if there's any thoughts on that from the audience. But everything you said there around data as an asset, that came up in the questions from the first session as well. And then that sense of not just helping civil service, but helping other sectors and helping smaller businesses as well, because not everybody in the private sector has the answers. And then really good to hear about that working jointly across governments. Thank you so much, Mark.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm sure everyone's heard of Visa, but you probably don't know what we do. Yes, we provide a network, so wherever you might tap your card anywhere in the world, we manage that transaction between the banks, your card issuer, and also the merchant's issuer. But that core business was started over 50 years ago, and now innovation, particularly innovation in government, is everywhere. I know it's hard to believe, but I've been working into the public sector for over 40 years. And I actually remember the term e-government being coined in 1992. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I've not even heard of the internet in 1992 or had a mobile phone. So somebody was very forward-thinking back then. But these days, payments innovation is everywhere, particularly in government. In Europe, 53% of total GDP are government payments, into government or out of governments. And this is where innovation can really take hold. So, for example, I'm sure many of you tapped a card of some sort to get here on the tube or the bus. Well, no matter which card you use, it's a payments gateway behind that, managing that transaction from where you entered the TfL network to where you departed. That payments gateway is provided by Visa, and TfL in London was the first mass transit system to implement that tap-and-go mechanism. Today, there are 500 cities around the world using that payments gateway. That has now been extended into government applications. So, for example, we work with the Ukrainian government on what they call their super app. And in fact, Ukraine is probably one of the best examples I've seen where they've enabled every transaction to their citizens, not just payments, but licenses, fees, tax payments, and so on, in what they call a super app. And no matter how you pay that government, for your taxes, your licenses, your fees, etc. Again, it's the same payments gateway, managing that complexity. And that's a big part of what I think embodies innovation, is making things simple for the citizen. Then finally, governments give out a lot of money, disbursements for social welfare payments, aid support, and those payments can be issued to, for example, refugees, asylum seekers, or the unbanked. Those are the kind of things that we work on with governments around the world. But you probably don't know if you pay for an Uber or you book an Airbnb, that actually it's Visa moving that money underneath to pay those drivers or those hosts. If you use Revolut or PayPal, it's Visa moving and pushing that money around. So we've come a long way in 50 years, and I think for me, that's really what embodies innovation. It never stops. Continuous change, it is about the culture, and don't fear failure. I think there's a couple of things I would say around innovation. First of all, resist the urge to run proof of concepts. Most concepts have been proven somewhere. Run a pilot. A pilot is what I would call a dress rehearsal for production. You'll get to the innovation much quicker that way. I've seen so many of my customers run proof of concepts and spend months and years and never get to the innovation. So resist that urge. The other, it's saying the obvious, but is look at the citizen's journey. Be obsessed by that. Look at all the use cases, look at the friction and remove that wherever you can, and really focus on that citizen journey. Last but not least, try to be open but secure. Now that sounds contradictory, but citizens like choice. So by open, I mean provide choice. But of course, you've got to provide security, not least in payments, but also with citizens' data. So
brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. As you say, I don't think many people do realise or understand kind of all the things that Visa do behind the scenes. And as you say, working with governments around the world on all these different payment systems, both in terms of payments out and payments in, on various things. And I really like what you say there. Run a pilot, not a proof of concept. Be interesting if people want to challenge that from where they sit. Be obsessed by the citizen's journey. We've heard quite a lot about putting the citizen first or people first. So really good to hear you echoing that. Thank you so much, Mark. Christina from Germany.
Thank you. I want to actually hone in on something that Claire has already said, and that in order to transform digital services and transform the public sector, we need to not only focus on the needs of citizens, but also enable and empower and understand the journey of public servants that we want to help us deliver a digital transformation. And we've been doing a project in Germany with the Ministry of the Interior in which we look at, so we as a digital service unit, we're a software delivery provider. So we often own the intermediate interface to the citizens, but we are building on the underlying processes or even policies that have been designed within government. And what we've been doing with the Ministry of the Interior, who is responsible for the ministerial legislative processes that are supporting the policy making, is we try to bring service design methods already into the policy making process to ensure digital ready legislation, which is something, if we don't start there, we will only be able to optimize on the level of experience of interaction design, but we won't really get to the core, and we will always end up basically putting paper forms online, and we cannot really use the full potential of digital and technology as a government. And what we did is that we elaborated on and we evaluated the policy-making process, and we went in with the assumption that it's a clear, fixed linear process at the end of which there's a successful law. In reality, it consists of a multitude of processes that vary across ministries, at the end of which there might or might not be a successful law. So we used service design methods to enable digital-ready legislation so that we have digital-ready legislation that then can enable better service design. And we basically are building on the same principles as we do in software development. We work cross-departmental, so we build interdisciplinary teams. We work user-centered, and we work iteratively. We built principles in the last year within the German government that are now being used on a political level, but also on a working level, to enable lawmakers, so people writing laws, to think about all factors digital already in the lawmaking process. And we provide them with a tool set, with methods, and also with a digital readiness check towards the end of the legislative process to ensure that the possibilities and the potential of all things digital and technology have been taken into consideration when designing the law. This is something that we have rolled out towards the end of last year through a roadshow across all 14 ministries. Almost 450 people adhere to these sessions, and now we've established a team that supports the usage of this framework, and we really stressed also towards the government that this is a work in progress. It's not a fixed process that we have redesigned once and now we're not going to touch it for decades again, but we will evaluate on how well the principles work in practice and what we can learn in the years to come to iteratively improve on digital-ready law.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Christina. So you're similar to what Claire said as well. You're thinking about not just understanding citizens, but understanding the journey of the civil servants that have to develop that policy, and coming at it from that different perspective where you're fundamentally rethinking the design of policy making and making sure that legislation is in place that's digital ready for the policies when they come through. Thank you so much. Andre, we're coming over to you.
Thank you. So it's great to be here today. Great to see so many of you here. So I've spent the majority of the past 2 decades innovating in the private sector. And when I think about innovation, I really think about 3 different sort of stages. The first one, actually a little bit to Mark's point, is copying. And so the first part, it may feel counterintuitive, but actually copying all the great work that my colleagues have been doing in the past year, that has really been foundational in the success of the Icelandic digital transformation. We haven't had to invent the wheel. We've literally looked at the playbooks by each and every one of you and copied what we thought was done well. Obviously, we localized it. But I really think that is a key part of innovation, is not trying to invent everything yourself, but copying it. Then you innovate. Then you start building things on top. And then you can spend more of your resources, time, and people building something new, like our mobile app. So we've built a brand new government local app that now, I believe, are around 1/3 of the entire population in Iceland. I know it's small, but still we have 1/3 of the population using the app. I don't know, I think we may have slides with a couple of photos of it. Then the last part of it is giving back. And so thinking about how can a small nation like Iceland give back to the global society of digital assets. And I just want to share one quick example. You all heard ChatGPT and OpenAI and all this AI revolution that's happening. But I don't think many of you know that Icelandic is the only other language than English that GPT-4 is trained on, so the models. Obviously, it speaks and translates a lot of languages, but the president of Iceland met with Sam Altman last year of OpenAI, and I don't know exactly how the conversation went, but it was probably something along the lines of, well, here we have a small micro language that is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. So if you train your GPT models on Icelandic, I'm sure it's going to be better at all the other languages. And so they actually accepted. So Iceland is the second language to be actually used in the training models of GPT-4. It still has a lot to learn, I will say, but it's getting there. And I think these are the types of things that we can start giving back to the global society after we've learned and sort of built on top of what you guys have been building.
Thank you, Andre. Can I just, the mobile app that you say a third of the population, is that kind of like a government gateway app? Can they access government services through this app?
Yes, you can. There's a single, we are a small nation, so like Estonia, and we have a single source of truth, a common identity. And so you can log in, you get a lot of your information, such as your family information, your cars, your homes. We have a digital ID, so we have driver license, we have hunting licenses. We now have the passport information in the app, so you don't forget your number and expiration date. And we started to build on top as well some proactive services, so we can start working with push notifications, such as, well, your passport is about to expire, why don't you renew it? And then in the app, you can start the digital service throughout, and you can finalize everything.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andre. So thank you to all of our speakers for those fantastic opening remarks. I'm going to throw it open straight away to the audience because I'm conscious of time, and I'm looking to the floor, and okay, wow, we've got lots of hands. I haven't taken any from this side, so I'm going to start with that one there, and then I'll come to the gentleman there. So there, and then second question there. We'll take 2 questions at a time.
Hi, good morning. Monica from DWP. I work every day in front of vulnerable people, and as a user as well. I started my digital life by using a digit for a PIN. Nowadays, it's impossible for me to remember all my PINs, and my question is, how are we going to tackle the access to gateways, for example, when we don't remember something, when we don't have the IDs for the people who live in the rural area, or for our 60, 90 plus people who have no interest to access the technology? Is the imprint technology or contactless technology part of the plan? Are you using any of those in your countries? Thank you.
Thank you. So you're working with vulnerable people, you said, but also from perspective of yourself, how do you make sure that different types of technology are available, maybe for some people that don't use assistive technology or digital IDs? So are there other ways like contactless, biometrics, those kind of things as well? Thank you. And we have a question, gentleman here as well. So we're going to take 2. So you can answer one or both of these questions, okay?
Hi, so my name's Gavin, I work for DWP. My question's in relation to a general mistrust some citizens have related to digital technology. So for example, in the UK, we're rolling out an emergency system that goes out to mobile phones to let citizens know when there's imminent danger. There's a lot of videos online telling citizens how to turn that off the phone. And my question would be, how do you manage a mistrust from certain citizens, and how do you stop the spread of misinformation as well?
Thank you. Huge question there, I think. How do you deal with trust issues and misinformation? So I'm going to, Megan, we haven't heard from you for a while, so I am going to come back to this order.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, trust is such an important topic. I might come back immediately on that one. So I think there are many different component parts to trust in government. I think trust is really centered in user experience. So if somebody has a consistent experience, somebody has a really rich experience, and they get the outcome that they want quickly, and it delivers exactly what they're looking for, they will inherently trust government. And we know that, and certainly many of the trust indices used to assess our governments look at user experience as a core component. I think there's a second piece which is really around communication and clarity and transparency, which is, so first of all, in terms of service transformation, what we're doing in the UK and what your colleagues in DWP are very much focused on is improving the quality of experiences so that people leave feeling as though that they've got what they've needed quickly, and that sort of foundational level of trust is there. And the second piece for me is really around transparency. And here this is around, as technologists, we need to think about this from lots of different ways. First of all, when it comes to AI and some emerging technologies, making sure we're being really transparent around how we're using them, the models are trained on, whether we use generative AI in the development of a particular piece of research or in code, and making sure we have the sensible standards and guidance and frameworks in place to be able to do that in a way which can build trust with the community. I think it's also about being really clear on how we're using data and giving optionality. So transparency in engaging on where we're using citizen data, for instance, or different technologies, giving citizens the opportunity, or users the opportunity, to opt out if they don't feel as though they would like their data used for those purposes or otherwise. But here in the UK, we're very fortunate. Our Digital Economy Act has some really fantastic legislative, is a brilliant legislative lever to enable us to work safely with data so that citizens can have that degree of trust in the way that we use it. And then the final point I would make, which is around, you mentioned identity as well, and I think certainly with the development of One Login, which is our single way for users to really simply and easily log in, authenticate, and be provided with identity verification, we're certainly looking at ways that we can have offline routes so that users don't need to use the digital channels available, which I think also it comes back to that point around optionality, ensuring that people can opt in to using digital technologies that make their experience easier, but also have the opportunity to meet people face-to-face or find alternative routes to verify and authenticate.
Thanks. Claire, did you?
Those were two big questions. Trying to simplify my answer, I would say be constantly focused on human-centered design. Do all of your work testing with your users. We will never know more or better than our users. And so both in, the example of edge cases, I think, which was the first question, of how to continue to develop iteratively and innovatively, identify those edge cases, but don't let those edge cases be the barrier to forward progress. Make sure that you are aware of them and are cataloging them and are constantly interrogating your solutions for those edge cases, but don't let them stop your forward progress, is one thing that I would say. And then the second, on identity, is such a charged challenge. And it does get down to the most fundamental issue, which is trust. And how do we build trust? And I think one way that we continue to try to move forward in this area is, I have found both culturally within organizations, people support what they help create. If they feel like they are part of the process, if they feel like they have been asked and that you are doing your best to bring technical solutions, they tend to forgive you for not being perfect, right? Because all of the things that we are doing are iterative, and technology moves so fast, as Megan said, like we have to be really nimble and agile in the way that we're delivering services. So those would be my counsel.
Thank you. I'm conscious we had lots of questions. I want to get to more questions, but did anybody have anything
quickly.
different? Yeah.
trust is one of my strategic KPIs, so we measure the percentage of citizens who abstain from using public services in a digital form because of trust issues. It's 4%, and my job is to keep it there through 2030. Good luck to me. One thing that helps is we're super transparent. When there is an issue, when you will screw up, and you will have big systemic things that happen that affect everyone. They may not be your own fault. We're super transparent about it. We go out on TV, we put up the press release saying this is what's happened, here's the plan. Don't hide things when you screw up.
Yeah, thanks. Andre, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I wanted to touch on some really good questions here, particularly around these vulnerable groups and people. We're spending a lot of our time and effort on focusing on these groups because, in a sense, we are lucky that over 95% of the total working population in Iceland has a single EID. So we're already past the point where the vast majority of people can log in easily in a single source. So we are spending a considerable amount of time on the last 5%. And so one of the things that we've been working on is an authorization system. So how can we help, how can someone that is not able or doesn't have the capabilities to help themselves with digital services provide a family member or a public servant with the authority to actually act on their behalf. So it's a challenging task to finish the last mile, but we're making progress.
Interesting, thank you. Okay, there were a couple of questions here. So, lady in the red here, we got a microphone. There we go, and then, yep, and the lady behind. We'll take those two questions here. Have we got a microphone for the lady behind? If you keep your hand up there. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Betty Du, and I work in the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities in the UK. So Lucas, you were talking a bit about how we can kind of encourage the sharing of data across services, across like healthcare and banks, for example, to drive the improvement of services. And Megan, you were talking about how if people have concerns about privacy, they could choose to opt in or they could choose to opt out. And I'm just wondering whether if someone chooses to opt out, could that mean that they are then excluded from services in the future if there are increasing concerns around privacy? And I guess I'm just wondering for the kind of reflections on what digital exclusion could look like in like 15, 20 years time.
Thank you. So a question about if people opt out, do they become excluded? And then, yeah.
Hello. My name's Kate from Office of Product Safety and Standards, which is part of the new Business and Trade Department. So we came up with an idea about a year and a half ago for a digital tool, which we thought would be off the shelf and could really help improve the way that we work. It's taken about all that time to procure the digital tool. Once that was finished, it was set up in about 2 weeks. So obviously the digital procurement process is complicated, and part of that is because of the risks of reputational risks, data security risks, and obviously if things go wrong, then you damage trust in government data, which as we've just been talking about is so important. But how do you, I'm asking the panel for reflections on how you balance or can get both the trust and the ability to fail quickly.
Yeah.
We don't know if this tool's going to work. We could have figured that out a year ago and be onto something else by now if we've been able to do it quickly. But yeah, really
Thanks.
Like your reflections. Thank you.
It'll be interesting, that one in the procurement session that's going on in parallel as well. So two questions there. One about if you opt out, will you become excluded? And then how do you create an ability to fail and take risks? Christina and Mark, I'm going to come to you on either of those first.
I'll just start on the opt-in, opt-out. I actually have a background in healthcare, so I can understand that question. I think what governments need to do, though, is inform citizens so they understand the implications of opting out. And the obvious example is if I'm taken into a hospital in a different part of the country and I'm laid there and the doctor says, I don't have your health records, I'm sorry. You need to know that when you opt out. And I think governments just should inform better, and that's part of the problem. It comes back to the earlier question about trust. You know, what will we do with your data? And that's an easy example that everyone will understand. And most people would say, oh yes, I'd like that, please.
Yeah, so a lot of it comes back to that communication and transparency. Christina, your thoughts on either of those questions?
Actually, also about opting in, opting out. I think it relates back to the trust question. Government has to provide services to people with different preferences, and I think it's not about digital only, it's about digital first and about being efficient in the service delivery so that you can cater to different target groups' needs and maybe focus or still provide analog services to people who prefer it that way, but to have such a great user experience and create trust through transparency, through user-centered products, that most people basically use services online. Because one thing that I've been missing a little bit in the conversation previous is digital transformation is not a goal in itself. The world is becoming digital, and trust in government is also being reduced because we are not becoming digital fast enough. And because people feel like, is this government still able to govern in this age? And we need to prove that through providing good digital public services or use still analog methods where that's necessary.
Yeah, thanks. It's what we said in the session before, policymaking is kind of digital. Everything is digital. You don't really need the... does anybody want to answer, before we move on to the last question in the time we've got, anybody answer the question about kind of risk-taking and failing?
Maybe on the procurement side, so addressing that question a little bit, if I may. So I think that's been one of the key successes in our transformation in Iceland, is that we completely flipped the traditional procurement model. Instead of procuring projects and software, we procured teams and skills. So we did a massive, large-scale procurement where we recruited 20 different private companies and teams for 2 to 4 years, so that now we're able to deploy them really fast in an agile way. So if we have a project we want to do a prototype of and test really quickly, we can deploy it within a matter of days. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, no pressure, but we've got time for one final question, so it has to be a fantastic question. I'm going to go to the lady there with a hand right up in the air. Just here. No, here we go. There we go, yep. Thank you. And I'm going to ask our speakers, everybody, to answer this question as concisely as possible.
Hi, I'm Beth, Department for Work and Pensions. You have talked about bringing readiness for digital into the policy process. We've also talked about continuous improvement and securing our current approaches. Have you got an example of how you balance that, making sure we're continuously improving what we do now with getting ready for a future that potentially looks nothing like now?
Great question. So continuity while we're transforming to a new world. I'm going to shake up the order a bit. Christina, I'll start with you.
I'm not 100% sure if I understood the question correctly, but what we try in digital-ready legislation is also to bring the legislative layer back to a level under which you can continuously improve a service, because it's not all written in law, if that makes sense, to basically create space and not keep the level of freedom or the degree of freedom so narrow that you have to change the law every time you want to iterate on a process.
So you're really getting the conditions in place so that
Yes.
when you're ready to go, everything's in place to go. Thanks. Andre, you're nodding at that. Would you like to answer this one?
Sure. Well, I think it's a challenging question, and it's a constant balancing act of figuring out what are you working on now versus the future. One way of thinking of this, how I've sort of adopted from the private sector, is categorizing projects and objectives into sort of core, strategic, and venture. So you might have a team that is very much focusing on infrastructure, that is working almost 70% on core, just maintaining and building, whereas they're almost doing no venture sort of innovation that may fail. Whereas you may have other teams that are working 70% on new innovations. Most of them will fail, and it's fine. So sort of categorizing strategically how you operate and allocate resources based on simple frameworks like that has been effective for us.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, the only thing that's certain is the world will continue to change, whether that's new policies or new technology, and it's changing at an ever-increasing rate. So you just got to understand that and bake that into your approach to innovation. And there are many technologies now that have matured, I would say, that enable that change to be embraced, like API technology, for example. So just think about that, and just think about a world that you can't envisage in 10 years, and how you will embrace that. In my world now, in payments, there's going to be digital currencies. Every bank will have one. There are cryptocurrencies. There's going to be all kinds of new things. So we're always trying to crystal ball gaze into the future and think, what's that mean for our business?
Thanks, Mark. Right, I'm going to go in this order, so...
Super tough, no silver bullets, other than putting the people doing the continuous service development from time to time together with the people doing the future scoping, making sure those teams and funding are somehow aligned. And maybe one thought is we always are looking for ways for really disruptive deep tech private sector companies to kind of use our government as a platform, not just companies from Estonia. So if for whatever reason the UK is a little slow on a project and you've got a partner looking for something cool, you can always send them our way. And then when it's more mature, we'll send it back to Megan. But you know, just finding ways to adopt and adapt faster.
Great, thank you, Claire.
Yeah, and I think I would build on something Christina said a little earlier. It's digital first, but not digital only, right? So we do have to focus on an omni-channel experience, making sure that we're able to meet our customers. So as technology is evolving as rapidly as it is, that we are meeting that moment, because we are constantly testing with our users and getting that feedback so that it can also synchronize with our legislative process, so that our policies are actually getting that feedback, our legislation is getting that feedback, so that we're able to be as nimble as possible and continue the capital investments that are needed for us to be able to constantly evolve as technology evolves.
Thanks, Claire. Megan, we started with you, got the last word.
Absolutely. So I interpreted the question a little differently, and I suppose what I reflect on is this interesting trade-off we have as digital leaders between the future-backed view of the world that we live in and some of our realities day to day. And how do we make the important trade-offs between that which is important, but potentially long sort of delivery times, things like modernizing our technology systems, addressing legacy debt, with some of the more cutting-edge emerging thinking. And I think the most important thing is prioritization and focus within those two categories. And certainly what we're looking at doing here in the UK at the whole of government level, through my perspective in the Central Digital and Data Office, is we have not set out to modernize all legacy technology in the next 3 years, but we've set out to modernize our highest risk systems from an operational and a security perspective, and we'll be holding ourselves very firmly to account to deliver that. And then when it comes to emerging technology, we've identified the 2 or 3 that we think at the whole of government level we need to be much more purposeful in addressing. And that predominantly at the moment is very much centered around mobile apps. So I think what this comes down to is we can't do everything at once. And often we have very brownfield estates where there's a lot of work to be done in fixing the old before we can move on with the new. But the most important thing is within those 2 categories, the sort of turning the tanker around type activities and the speedboats that we can send off into the future, we focus and we stay really razor-sharp, keep a really razor-sharp focus on the things that count, that will deliver the greatest outcomes for the greatest number of people.
Thank you so much, Megan. We are sadly out of time. I'm sure you will join me in thanking our fantastic panel here.